All right, good morning, everybody. This is the A Cup with Joe podcast. I'm your host, attorney Joseph Wilson, and today we're going to be having a very interesting discussion about the state of American politics and where are we now? Where do we go from here? And we have a very special guest who I've known for a long time, and that's Tony Mitchell. What's going on, Tony?
Man, how you doing, man? Good to see you, brother. I'm glad to kind of jump on the podcast with you, man. I know you had the podcast before, but I'm looking forward to just talking about politics and just catching up a bit, man.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it too, and see all the things that you're doing as well as with the Emerging 100. Very proud of you. Like I said, we've known each other for quite some time back.
Long time.
Them St. Louis days, man. What was that about? I'm trying to think how many years, 10 or so years ago, maybe when we met.
Yeah, probably about 10 at this point. It's crazy. I know they always say when you're friends with somebody for 10 years, you're friends with them for life, man. But yeah, we hit that mark, man.
Back when you were a young grasshopper.
Yes, sir.
We both were. But yeah, good times, man. But I want to just kind of start off by talking a little bit about what you do in your background to kind of shape this conversation.
Sure. So, I'm a lobbyist. I work for a pharmaceutical company right now and, handle the government affairs for the whole Southeastern region. So, I always say it's much more of a territory than a region. About 15 states. So from Maryland all the way down to Florida across the Gulf to Texas. And when I always say I'm a lobbyist, I get like a lot of different questions about like what that means. And I always kind of draw the comparison to Remy Denton on House of Cards, but without all of the drama that follows because there's no Frank Underwood with me. So I always kind of just give it that kind of description and hopefully give people some context on what it is I do.
And that was exactly what I was thinking is, all right, got to be like House of Cards, like
right.
A lot of, backroom meetings and strings being pulled behind the scenes.
Right.
But it's a lot different than that is what you're saying.
Oh, certainly. So, I think that, depending on how you're lobbying, if it's on the state level or the federal level, things just move, very, very differently. I know on the federal side, I worked at a law firm when I first kind of got started on the lobbying side and on the federal side. And that stuff moves a lot slower. You're having conversations with legislators really on the interests of whoever it is you're representing. So when I was at the firm, I had a book of clients, about 8 different clients, and I would have conversations with legislators on, issues concerning, 340B program, because I work primarily in healthcare, on different topics, and just let them know that like, hey, this is how this would, influence the people in your district and, what the repercussions may be, and hope that their, vote on something may be swayed based on what you're saying. So really having a lot of conversations based on relationships. It's relationship building. Yeah.
Gotcha. And obviously you and I went to law school together. I was a year ahead of you.
Mm-hmm.
What made you say, all right, I don't want to practice law. I want to get into this work. I want to be more so in the political arena versus just doing straight law.
Man, I go back and I've thought about this a few times. I got my start in politics working with, and, this was in 2008, working with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. I was working for my member back in Georgia, Sanford Bishop. He represents the Columbus, Georgia area. That's where I'm from. And I got my start with that Congressional Black Caucus internship. And honestly, things just took off from there. I think the environment in D.C. at the time was so electric. I would have always considered myself an undergrad at the point, just a country boy from Columbus, Georgia. I had no real, I was a poli-sci major, but I really did. But I really just didn't have any real depth of politics outside of the classes that I took. And I spent that first year working on the Hill in 2008, which, as many of you know, that was right before Barack Obama kind of went into office. And there was just an energy in D.C. and fell in love with the city, fell in love with the process, just enjoyed seeing everything that was kind of happening there. And I remember at the time, I had a meeting and I shared an office with the chief of staff at the time. And she had some lobbyists come in to talk about something. I don't remember what it was. And she let me sit in on the meeting. And after the meeting, she said, Tony, those are the guys that make things shake in DC. And I was like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? She was like, when they come in, we listen because, at the time they were working for the Podesta group, which was, a group started by Tony and John Podesta. Many people know John Podesta to be one of Clinton's chief of staffs back in the day, and they had that firm was booming. They represented everyone from every industry. And she said, those are the guys that you want to be like. And I was just like, okay, all right, sounds good. And I didn't have much contacts, but, I followed up with them and I emailed them and grabbed coffee with them and really began to understand what they did. And it was something that I wanted to do. I really love the policy side of things. And when I had conversations with different people, the congressmen and people around, the Capitol, on just the value of a law school degree and going into that space, they've always said that it was very, very valuable. It's been a huge help to me. Mm-hmm. So when I thought about going into lobbying, law school was the meeting that I wanted to go. And I think, we've known each other since my first year of law school. That was always the direction that I wanted to go in. I spent my law school summers working in D.C. at a lobbying firm, both of my law school summers. And when I graduated, I moved to D.C. and got right on the policy side. So it's been an area of interest from day one, man.
Yeah, man, you were always in DC. I was like, and then when I got there, because I would hear you talk about DC,
right?
And then you remember I did that externship where I spent the summer.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're in politics or law, like DC is just different. Like it's a completely different animal than any other state, city, in the country. It's just different.
Yeah, man. I remember hearing the stat a few years ago about DC having the most lawyers per capita, and I think everybody's a lawyer in DC. So it's just like. It's certainly good to kind of get on the ground level in DC as a lawyer, especially if you're going into politics, because it does. I'll always say that it adds a check to your name whenever you look to transfer out. So when I worked in DC, I worked at in a policy shop for a while. I had a few other different roles before working at the law firm. And when I decided to leave DC, everyone was like, "Man, you have this DC experience," and it's just like. I guess, like it's worked out well for me, man. But I do think I learned a lot because things move so fast there in the DC area that you really are forced to.
Well, speaking of DC, I want to kind of transition into our discussion about the state of American politics. And, a lot has transpired over the last 4 years with this presidency. It's been an unprecedented presidency. And then we have Republicans and Democrats, and I say they really act more nowadays, more like kind of like political gang members. It's the red and you're on your side, we're on their side, and it's hard. It just doesn't seem to be a lot of compromise.
Right.
And obviously, most recently, the state Capitol insurrection. So how would you sum up kind of where we are in 2021 in American politics?
Man, you said a lot there, and just kind of mentioning some of the things that's happened over the last 4 years and the last 2 weeks, honestly. But I'd say that we're at a huge turning point, and I think that it's really up to us to really determine whether that turning point is for better or for worse. I think as a country, the last 4 years have kind of highlighted a set of values by quite a few people, that have really called into question just where we are as a nation. And I think, for me, I've kind of taken a seat back and just really thought about what year are we in? It's like 2021, and we're very, very similar to some of the days of the 60s and the 70s. And, I think we're at a point where, we have to show the world that we're better and that the fabric of the nation is stronger than what we've shown over the last 4 years. And that turning point will either show that or that we're just as ugly as our past and, who we really are perceived to be over the last 4 years. So I think we're at a turning point, just given some of the things that have happened. You talked about the Capitol Hill insurrection. I really think that put on display for the world to see, what privilege looks like. You had a group of individuals who said that we refuse to accept that we lost an election. And because of that, we're going to show you that we're not standing for it. And I think that that's the place we're in right now. I think we have to determine whether we're going to let that be the shining light and represent who we are as a country, or whether we're going to really step up to the plate and make a change there.
Yeah, man. And you said a mouthful right there. And what always has frustrated me, and obviously, I was born here. I love this country. But what's frustrated me is just the hypocrisy.
Man.
We always ourselves out to the world. We're the land of the free.
Right.
Do things the right way. And I was watching this movie, American Sin, and there was a line in the movie, and the main character was an ex-Marine, and his son got killed by a cop. And he mentioned that, when white people feel, generally speaking, in the history of this country, feel that their rights are being taken from them or they're being wrong, they don't do it in a peaceful way. They don't protest that typically in a peaceful way. They tell black people to be peaceful and to, suffer silently and, wait and go through all of that. But when they feel those things are happening to them, they do what they did at the Capitol. Again, generally, not everybody, but they use violent means to protest those issues. And so that's the frustrating part for me, is how we're going to hold ourselves out to the world that, we're about freedom, we're about equality, we're about peace, but we don't practice that. So, I mean,
it's a double standard, man. It's a double standard. I mean, I think everything in the world flows just fine as long as the oppressor wins. And I think that when we start to look at situations like we've seen here in Georgia, where we elected, the first black man to the Senate,
right,
and we've taken control over, the House and the Senate following a presidency that, white supremacists and, some white people really felt emboldened. They felt like they didn't have to hide in the shadows anymore. They felt that they could say whatever they wanted to say. Whenever that came to an end, because we let that live for so long. And like, when what they say, like when you water those seeds, man, they grow. And we lived in that, far too long to where now they refuse to go out without a fight. And the president, Donald Trump gave a lot of them so much firepower and ammo to really act how they wanted to act without there being consequences. That's where we are today. And, I think that as a nation, we have to determine, I think we saw a lot in some of those hearings when they were counting the electoral college votes, where, people really put politics to the side. And I think that's where we have to be. You saw leaders like Mitch McConnell get up there and say, we really have to be honest with the American people. I know we played politics. We played into this Donald Trump stuff for 4 years, but now we just got to keep it real because there's too much at stake. So,
but they're not going to just come out and say, look, man, we screwed up with Donald Trump. Like, we were wrong to be behind it. They'll never do that. And,
they won't.
To your point, it's like, because a lot of folks who listen may not be from Georgia. There was so much advertising from Democrats.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Past months. But if you look at kind of the tone and the undertone of a lot of the ads that they were running, especially against Raphael Warnock, there were racial undertones
most definitely
permeating through. They darkened his skin in one of the ads. They said, and there was some other rhetoric they were using. Basically, he is unsafe for America. He's dangerous. All of the undertones, we know what they mean by it.
Yeah.
They're saying to their base, mostly white base, you cannot trust this black man in the United States Senate. He hates America.
Yeah.
They were saying that in the ads. Unbelievable to me.
It is. But I do think the bright spot is that the American people, or at least here in Georgia, or at least in Atlanta, really showed otherwise. They really showed that, like, hey, we won't stand for bigotry. We won't stand for this being the direction that we're going in as a country. And I think we're still very much divided, you know what I mean? Because when you look at that electoral map in any, whether it's the national election or this election, it's predominantly red. You look at the Midwest, it's red. You know what I mean? Like you talk about Missouri, you got St. Louis and Kansas City, and everything else is red. You look at Georgia, you have Atlanta, Columbus, and Savannah, and everything else is red. But like, luckily, so many people live in those areas where, we can make up some ground. But I do think that overall, we are people that, are bigger than this. We are bigger than some of the things that, have happened over the last 4 years. And I really hope to see that we can move forward, man. We can really move forward in a place where we can make some progress.
Yeah, I'm optimistic, man. And I tell folks all the time, because frankly, I don't identify either way, Democrat, Republican, and I can have a conversation with somebody who's more conservative or more liberal. We can respect each other. My point was, even 4 years ago, was, there's Republicans, there's Democrats, and then there's Trumpers. There are people who are just worship him like as if he's a
Yeah.
cult figure. And a lot of black people were saying it's not his policies that we're concerned about as much. It's his rhetoric. And he makes it more dangerous to be black in America because, like you said, he's emboldened so many people to just be like, I don't care. Like, I'll say what I want it. So you're putting us in a position where we're having to react to somebody being racist towards us.
Right.
It'd be very dangerous for both sides.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely.
But yeah. Anyway, I want to transition because we're talking about, you know, even Senate seats. And I was just thinking about this. I said, okay, their salary, I think in the Senate, if you're a U.S. senator, I think it's like $177,000 or something like that.
Somewhere around there.
But then I thought about how much money they spent on advertising for that one Senate seat. They spent like $500 million. So I'm like, that Senate seat worth $500 million at the end of the day? Because I mean, why would you spend money on it?
You know, it is. It is. I mean, I think that, I mean, you look at the state of the Senate right now, and let's just take Trump's administration, you know, to be an example. Think about the Supreme Court justices that that were elected under Trump. And if you take a step down, just the federal court judges that were there for a lifetime that are going to be there for a long time because of President Trump. And you think about how they dictate policy, they dictate, you know, I mean, you look at issues like abortion and all those issues that are so interwoven into like American debate, you know, and you look at those 4 years, and if Democrats are in charge of the Senate, some of that doesn't happen. You know, some things don't come to the floor, some things don't get voted on. And I think that's why Republicans, you know, Mitch McConnell has been, you know, I think, you know, Democrats and Republicans operate very, very differently. Mitch McConnell, I think in the Republican Party, they take an approach of like, we're going to get things through by any means necessary. We don't care if it's fair. Right. We don't care if we told y'all not to do it. I mean, we can look at when Obama had, you know, a judge in the Supreme Court. They were like, we're not letting it go through. The same thing happened with them being right before Trump being the election, and they're like, "It is our duty to put."
Different. They said, "No, this is a little different."
Yeah,
our president is running again, or something. Some rationale they use.
Yeah. And so, you know, there's a stark difference between how that happens, but a lot of that is in the Senate, and I think that you know when you have so many industries that can be affected, so many things that can be voted up or voted down, it's certainly worth the money. And with Dems now being in that 50-50 split where the VP can come in and be the tiebreaker, it's even more important now. And I think that, you know, it's important to realize that. Now, I think that there are going to be members of the Senate now, people who are a bit more fiscally conservative or whatever that may be, like your Joe Manchins in West Virginia, who tend to teeter on the line of like votes, and, you know, Susan Collins in Maine. They're going to be the people that they're going to become everyone's best friends overnight. And now we're going to see if we get to 50-50, we know we can get the VP to come in and go, you know, the route that we want to go. But in those cases where we don't, it's going to be a lot of politics at play. And I think you want people on your side when it comes down to it.
A lot of Remy Danton meetings.
Yeah. A lot of backroom meetings.
So, I mean, earlier I likened political parties to gangs. Do you think we need to do away with this political party system and affiliations? And is that even practical to do? Because it doesn't seem to be in the best interest of the country, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a tough question, man. I think, you know, the political system, you know, I don't think it will remain a two-party system over the next 20 years. I definitely think there will be some changes there. But I think that's easier said than done. You know, I think largely due to just people's participation in the political process. I think that parties have a ton of power. And that happens when people don't vote. When you don't vote, it landlocks Democrats and Republicans. And when you don't hold your elected officials accountable, it really adds to that. So I think that, you know, right now we're at a point, and like I said, a turning point as far as our nation and politically, where you see your AOCs in the Democratic Party who are a little far left than the centrist Democrats. You see people like, you know, Josh Hawley, in Missouri, who aligns himself very, very close to, President Trump. And really, I think, question the election to align himself for a future that pulls in some of those people that like Trump so much, that is very, very different from your traditional Republicans. And I think that you're going to see the parties tend to move further and further on the fringes to where if we don't do something soon, we're going to have very, very far left, very, very far right, and your centrists, and the parties are really going to wind up splitting themselves. So I definitely see over the next 20 years that things kind of shift to a point where, we may have 3 parties, or maybe there's 4, or maybe there's just subsects of the Democratic and Republican Party, but it won't be the standard, what we see right now.
Okay. So now we know historically, most Black people have strongly tied themselves to the Democratic Party.
Right.
Do you think that's a mistake for us to not have a more balanced representation currently in each party? Some are fiscally conservative. I consider myself fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And I think that's kind of that's the issue, is that we want social change. And that's probably why we align ourselves more so with the Democratic Party. But is that
right? Yeah, in politics they call you a blue dog Democrat, but and that's because you're fiscally conservative. But I think that's an interesting question, and I think the truth is there's no such thing as a perfect party, and I always kind of laugh at when people really expect there to be that, because we can't hold politics to a higher standard than we do everything else in life, and I think that's the reality. No one works at a job that they like 100%. There may be some, very few people, but you won't like your job 100%, even in your relationship. There are going to be things in your relationship that there's always going to be compromise. So I think that, it's important that we align ourselves to parties based on values. You know what I mean? I think there are going to be things that the Democratic Party pushes that I'm going to look at and I'm going to say, that's not really for me. That doesn't really affect me. And you have to be able to look through the policies and see that certain things don't affect me. There's going to be certain things that I don't agree with, but the Democratic Party, it may be a party that I can align myself with from a value standpoint. And it's the same way we have to look at our family and friends. I think that just because you and I have a disagreement doesn't mean that we're any less of friends. And I think we have to look at our parties the same way. Just because the Democratic Party wants to push something that I might not personally agree with. Now, if it's outside of your realm of your values, then I think that you have to do some reconsideration. Maybe you're more, in the middle as a libertarian or whatever that may be. But I think if you align yourself with a party based on your values, traditionally you can put yourself in a few buckets. And, you really have to take some of the good with the bad, because there's never going to be a perfect party. I mean, there's so much policy that's out there to where if we wanted to find a party that checked all the boxes of everything we're going to look for, we'll never find it. It's impossible to do so. So I think you got to look at values, and I think that's the best way to kind of look at the party system.
Right. I'm not sure, Tony, have you heard of P. Diddy? He's coming up with a new party.
Yeah.
It's like the new Black Party or something like that. Have you heard of that?
Yeah. I've heard about it. And it's interesting. I think it's interesting. Yeah. I don't know if it's worth a party, but I think that, it's certainly important to push what he's talking about. And I think the message is a message of accountability. And I think that it's a message of just ensuring that our voice as Black people is heard. And I think the problem that we run into politically, I mean, we've seen the same thing in this current election cycle. During the primaries, everyone's trying to figure out who they want to vote for. And there may be 5 or so candidates. I think while we're trying to align ourselves to whatever that candidate is, as we kind of funnel down to there being a Republican candidate and a Democratic candidate, we don't hold their feet to the fire enough. And I think as Democrats, and as Black people, more importantly, that is big. That's such a point of contention for us, because we are such a large demographic of the reason why Democrats are able to get to win office in general. You know what I mean? You look at Atlanta with the current Senate race and even the presidential election with Joe Biden, where you have a large Black population that came out and by large numbers voted him to win the state of Georgia and voted for John Ossoff and Reverend Warnock to win the Senate. And to what means, you know what I mean? Like what is Joe Biden going to do differently for Black people than what he planned to do before winning that? And I think that, I think Diddy is really looking to hold our vote hostage. It's like, this is the list of things for the Black community that we need to see some change on.
Yeah.
We need you to sign off on saying that, like, you're willing to do X, Y, and Z before we give you our vote instead of after the fact. Because now after the fact, we're hoping that we can get stimulus money. We're hoping that we can get student loans forgiven. We're hoping that we can get things done for small businesses. Yeah. And the reality of it is he doesn't have to, you know what I mean? Like, we didn't hold his feet to the fire to where those policies are going to be at the forefront. Now, Republicans, they look out for their people. And I think that as Democrats and as Black people who align ourselves to a party, we have to really begin to look at the election that's coming in 2020 now. We have to really talk to the candidates now and say, like, this is the state of Black America. This is the direction that we really want to go in. And when we hold their feet to the fire early, then when throughout the process, we can say that, like, no, we're not going to support you. Now, the hard part comes down to, let's say that they choose not to align themselves with the messages that the African-American community is really pushing. Are we willing to step out there and, vote for a Republican? And I think from a lot of Black people, the answer is no. And that's because the Republican Party has generally been very, very far to the right. But, I don't know. Like, I think over the next few years, will we see more of a centrist Republican that more Black people can get behind? And I don't know the answer to that question. I think, the basis of it all is that we need to have a better grasp on policy in general. We really need to understand what these candidates are pushing and not just align ourselves that, like a lot of Black people did when, Barack Obama was running, just because he's Black, we gonna vote for him. And if that's the way that you vote, that's perfectly fine. But I found that there's just been a lot of misunderstanding and miseducation of what policies are affecting our people. And because we don't understand those, we can't step up to the plate and have a voice on them.
That's facts, man. And then I guess the frustrating part, like you mentioned, this is a cycle. This has been going on for so long. They come in our communities, they get our vote, and then they're gone for the next 4 years, and we're like just waiting. And that happens, and then it starts all over again. 4 more years, promises come back. Same old tired cycle, but nothing's really changed. We're just basically being used, and it's our fault too. It's because we're allowing ourselves to be misused without any real accountability.
I mean, I think that we will, and this is me being hopeful, that we're moving into a place politically where, the focus is a lot less on power and a whole lot more on people. I think what we saw in Washington, D.C. was a bunch of legislators on the floor that day, counting electoral votes, pontificating, and really aligning themselves based on getting themselves reelected. And
Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz.
Ted.
Yeah, man. And it's crazy. Like, you talk about Ted Cruz. I could never be a person who was willing to flip flop as much as he did when someone disrespected my mother, on the basis level. Like, you talk about my mama, man. Like, we can't even, like, I can't allow myself to ever.
Life is ugly.
Yeah, man. Like, it's just, it's unheard of. But I really hope that we begin to, like, as a people, really start to, like, remember what it is to be a good person and remember what it is to be empathetic. And I think that those are the things that we're starting to see. I think that this new generation, Gen Z, that's coming up, that's, forgive my language, but they're just willing to flip shit on his head, man. And I think that they're not taking this whole political, Democrats and Republican thing as serious as some of the older generation. And
that's white and Black too. That's why that generation.
Most definitely. And that's healthy. That's healthy. I think that we have to be willing to look at, what it means to be a person again. And I think that, the last 4 years, 8 years, whatever we want to look at the time frame, has been so political, and there's so many issues that just aren't. COVID relief shouldn't be a political issue. whether we're wearing a mask should not be a political issue.
Oh my God.
And the standard is always shifting with Dems and Republicans, because you have a bunch of Republicans that say that, like, I don't want to wear a mask because it's an infringement on my rights.
Idiot.
But like, let's shift the topic to women's rights and reproductive rights. And now the answer is, well, an infringement of their rights doesn't matter because this is the way that it should be. And we can't have it both ways. So I do think that we have to become more human. I think that as we look at the next generation of politicians, we really have to focus on humanity and empathy, and how do we really stop playing politics and really pour into like what people are feeling these days, because it was a reason that people were willing to storm the Capitol. They felt the way, and that them feeling the way was powerful enough to where they were like, we're not taking this no more. Now imagine if that same energy was focused in a way that was productive. Right. And, you know, where we're not storming the Capitol and we're just really holding elected officials accountable to where it's like, we're not going to let you play politics with our money, with our emotions, with all of these things. And we're going to put someone in office that really cares about the direction that we're going as a country.
Yeah, man, we got a lot of issues to deal with, man.
Most definitely, man. Most definitely.
Right. That's all that's been played is politics, especially with COVID. I mean, the mask issue. I remember Donald Trump literally saying, I feel like people who wear masks don't like me, or something to that effect, as if it's a shot against him if you wear a mask.
Right.
It's completely ridiculous. And it's cost a lot of people their lives.
A lot.
We're over 300,000 now. So it's really sad. Do you think more of us, and I'm speaking about Black people, need to get into politics and start running? Because, you know, and I'm sure you've had folks come up to you about, hey, Tony, when you're running, or I've had the same thing. And I'm like, probably never, because I don't want to get destroyed. They're going to try to destroy me. It's dirty. It's a horrible game. So
it is.
Why would anybody want to get into that when you know they're going to rip your life apart and try to, you know what I mean, destroy you for the basically?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that it really takes a special person to really believe that there are issues that are bigger than ourselves. And I think that good politicians, or the ones that are supposed to be in office, really feel that way. And I think that, you know, you're really willing to put yourself on the line for the betterment of your community and for your people and of the nation. And I think that there's some who get into it for the wrong reasons, who really want the power. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there's a group of politicians who really feel like the need to give back and the need to be leaders and be at the forefront of change. I mean, we look at some of our leaders in the past, you know, your Martin Luther Kings, your Malcolm X's. And if they were willing to sit on their hands just because things were unpopular or because they knew what people would destroy them, where will we be right now? You know, so, you know, I think that sometimes we have to be altruistic. And I think that in that altruism, we begin to look at the lives of others, regardless of whether the policy affects us personally. We really want to see the progress of our people in general. And that's Black people, white people, the nation in general. And I think that the more we have people that think like that, the more we'll see the shift to, you know, us kind of going in the right direction. The more we start to have these people who want to just be in power, like, you know, you talk about your Ted Cruz's and, you know, whoever that may be, we're going to be in the same place, because the focus isn't on people. The focus is on how can I position myself to obtain more power, to be more of a person of influence. Right. And I think it's important to kind of make that focus go back to the people.
That's real, man. Tell the folks, what should we be watching and reading that's objective, not necessarily one side or the other, to help us get more politically informed and understand how politics really work and how policy really work?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I would say, and this is something that I've been bad at, and as I've gotten older, I'm trying to get a lot better at it, but just reading the local newspaper, man. Like, the local newspaper really has so much information on what's going on in the city. You know, I try to look at the local newspaper back home in Columbus and, you know, even Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You know, I think that those papers have so much information. I also think that, and this is the non-fun part of it, just like looking at what legislation your representative is bringing to the floor. And I think you get a sense of how much people in Congress and people in power really care about their communities based on the legislation that they bring to the floor. And I think that, it's not the sexiest read, but at least you're a lot more informed.
Right.
One thing, and this isn't on the reading side, but I would also just, urge people to listen to podcasts. I'm big on podcasts. There's one that I swear by, the New York Times has one called The Daily. And it's generally like a 30-minute podcast that really walks you through different issues. And there was one on like COVID release. There's been some on the election cycle. There's some on a variety of topics, but a lot of those podcasts are a very easy way to just kind of put your AirPods in, digest, listen, and get things through osmosis, as opposed to just like reading a bunch of, legislation or reading the newspaper. So I would suggest listening to a podcast that is refreshed, maybe every 2 or 3 days, that kind of touch on the issues that are going on in the United States. The news is always a pretty biased, way of getting news, depending on what you listen to. So for me, when I listen to the news, I try to listen to both sides. I'll tune into a CNN and everything. So, now and again, I'll tune into a Fox News to get perspective. Because
Warnock. Sorry.
Yeah. But it's always important to get perspective. And I think that the more perspective we have, the more we're able to kind of make conscious decisions on the direction we want to go in. When we're fed one thing, you think about your Trumpers that are just fed one thing constantly,
right?
Because we live in a soundbite generation where people base their politics off of what they hear in 20 seconds on the news. And it's just like, who does that? You know what I mean? And the reality of it is the majority of people do that. So you have to be able to listen to things objectively on both sides to really, really dictate the way that you're going to move forward on the political scene.
It's funny you say that, because the sound bites, because now all you hear is cancel culture. Oh, they kicked them off Twitter. That's cancel culture. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? That's
just think about how people really spun defund the police.
Yeah,
that thing turned into something that was so far different than what like the actual conversation was around, to where it was politicized to a point where defunding of the police became a Democratic thing, and it became something that we're like, now Democrats don't want police to be in, they don't want police power. They want no structure at all. We're just crazy radicals that don't want anyone telling us what to do. And it's like, that's not the conversation. You know what I mean? So it's soundbite culture is real. And I think that, moving forward, just considering that, we have to really make politics digestible. You know what I mean? And that's why I always say podcasts, follow some, there are always, Instagram accounts that you can follow. Just look at stories or whatever that may be, to get to be able to meet people where they are, to where it makes it a lot more palatable for people to feel like they're involved in the process.
All right, man. We've had a great conversation. I want to end with this question, because we talked about where we are in the state of politics in America right now. I want you to kind of forecast 5 or 10 years from now, kind of where you see us as a society politically. And are we better off? Are we at the same? Are we a little worse? Or?
You know what? I think that I like to say that we're going to be better off. I think that, the last 4 years, the last 4 weeks have really been a wake-up call to Americans. And I think I say that for Black people, white people, brown people, whoever that is. I think as Black people, it's put us in a place to where we have seen the ugliness on a national stage, even though a lot of us have experienced that on a day-to-day. And it's really put a lot of us in situations to where it's like, how can I really be the change that I talk about? How can I be the change that, to where I'm not the person that's just like writing Facebook messages or talking on Instagram or putting up little videos? How can I really be directly involved in the process? And I think the generation, is becoming, as people say, more woke. You know what I mean? That people are starting to understand a lot more of what they can do to change. I think for white people, it's put them in a place to where it's like, you can't act like you didn't see what happened over the last 4 years and in the last 2 weeks. And it's really put them in a place where white privilege, the hood of white privilege, was pulled back so far to where it's like, now you have to determine, there's a line drawn in the sand. Now you have to determine whether you are what that was, or whether you are going to be someone that pushes for greater change and greater equality. And I think it's put them in a place to where it's like, now you have to have that conversation with your cohort of friends. Now you have to have that conversation with your parents. Now you really have to hold their feet to the fire to really see what their take is on, because if not, you're adding to the problem. So I think that because of these events, I think that, every so many years we have a wake up call as a country. This was our wake up call. And we talk about answering the bell. I think this is the time where we can really answer the bell of coming together. So I think politically, we see a more diverse group of voters coming. I think Gen Z is a group that, that voting group isn't even into full maturity yet. I think half of them can't even vote. So I think over the next 5 to 6 years, you'll see a more progressive mindset when it comes to a lot of the issues. I think that we'll see, some of our older generation begin to kind of phase out. So some of those old mindsets will begin to kind of fall off the face of the earth. And the people in the middle, our generation, will be there to be as a bridge, to kind of be as a bridge to the younger generation that needs some guidance, while also paying respect and standing on the shoulders of the giants that came before us. So I think, we'll see more people added to the voting rolls. I see, Stacey Abrams has made that her calling in life, leading up to what is sure to be a wild 2022, where we have elections here for governor, in the off year where we have a lot of House seats coming up for re-election. And even this year, where we have in our city in Atlanta, where we have a bunch of city council races and a mayor's race. And I think people are going to be a lot more involved. I think we have to find out a way to, like I said earlier, meet people where they stand. And, we can't be afraid of our own people, man. Like, I think so many of us, as we kind of continue to rise and grow, in our success and, being more affluent in the communities that we kind of work in and constantly are in a day-to-day basis, we can't forget our people. And right. I think, a lot of us can't be afraid to go have the conversations. We're in the immersion where we're talking to the kids, at Best Academy and in some of the low income schools, and really giving them the message and the tools to be a part of the process as well. So I think we become better. I think we become stronger. It's a process though. And it has to be an intentional process to where we're holding ourselves accountable. We're holding our elected officials accountable. We're holding our white counterparts accountable. We're holding our own people accountable. And that greater accountability across the board really will put us in a place where we'll see a chipping away of just the relics of the past, man. And we'll move into a more positive space.
Yeah, man. I think you hit the nail on the head. And the biggest takeaway I took from that is being apathetic, not getting involved, not taking a position, especially on these glaring issues like
right.
racism.
Yeah.
You can't just sit on the sidelines and just be like, oh, that's bad.
Right.
I don't do anything about it. It's like,
right.
No, you got to kind of take a position, take a stand.
I agree, man. I agree.
Yeah, man. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation with you, Tony.
It's been good, man. It's been good. It's good to catch up with you and just kind of talk about these kind of things, man. I'm happy to kind of chat with you anytime you want to, man. I appreciate it.
No doubt, man. Tell the folks how they can get in touch with you as well.
Man, it's crazy. This has been a year where I've just really been focused on growth. Growing myself and trying to figure out just like how to pour back into myself and then pour back into my family and just get myself ready for whatever God has planned for me over the next few years. So I'm actually off of social media right now. I took a break from, Instagram and took a break from Facebook to really just get in my word, begin reading. When I get back on, man, my Instagram name is all the Mitches, all _the Mitches. That's the name from quite some time ago. Just a play on words. And then, on Facebook, I'm Tony L. Mitchell Jr. Twitter, Tony Mitch Jr. I believe. I don't use Twitter as often as I.
Yeah, me on Twitter back in law school.
Man, yeah. That's when Twitter was popping, man. But now it's crazy. Social media is such a liability these days, man. So I've really just put myself in a place where I'm just trying to focus and tap in, read, become smarter, and whatever God has planned for me over the next couple of years, man. I just want to be ready to strike when the iron's hot, man. So
Mayor Mitchell.
Man, who knows, man? Who knows? I thought about politics, but I gotta follow God, man. Follow where God leads me, man. So we'll see what happens, bro.
That's what's up, man. Well, just know if they come to me for information, if you want them nothing, bro. I don't know nothing.
I appreciate it, man. Especially about them days in St. Louis, man, when we lived together. So that has to be redacted.
Oh yeah, man. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know Tony Mitchell.
Exactly. Let's keep it that way.
All right, man. Well, this has been the A Cup with Joe podcast. Thank you to our guest, Tony Mitchell. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you on the next show.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, man.
No doubt.